Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. Today, we are going to be talking a lot of football, not just the NFL, but also college football, as the college football season is just 5 days away. That's right. Week 0 kicks off on August 24th. We'll start covering our college football preview later on in the show, starting with the Big Ten today. But before we get into the Big Ten, we're going to do a little bit of NFL coverage as well. We had some rookie quarterbacks, 4 of them in action over the weekend and earlier this week. We're going to rank them, talk about their performances, give them a grade and a ranking 1 to 4. Maybe have a little bit of more talk surrounding them. Speaking of those rookie quarterbacks, in segment 2, at least one of them was named the starter over the weekend. We will talk about that as well as other quarterback news coming out of the NFL before finishing off our show with the continuing segment previewing every single NFL team. Today, we take a look at the Denver Broncos, give them a grade for the offseason as well as a prediction for a season record. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use the super chat feature right next to the chat option. If you do either of those two things, I apologize. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, feel free to put that in the chat, put that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying in today's show, we are going to start off with a little bit of preseason rookie quarterback rankings. And starting off with that, we have 4 rookie quarterbacks that have gone and participated in week 2 of the NFL preseason. Before we get into the 4 that did participate, we're going to talk about the 2 that did not. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about J.J. McCarthy in the last week. He got injured. He is out for the season. This is why he didn't play. The other one is a little more head-scratching of a move, right? The Falcons chose not to play Michael Penix Jr. for week 2 of the preseason. They also said he would be shut down for next week. So we get to see Michael Penix in 1 week of action in the preseason. And honestly, it wasn't really, and it's really a shocking move, right? You look at the Falcons, and they're not playing Kirk Cousins, right? They're not going to sit out there and throw Kirk Cousins. It doesn't make any sense to not put in Michael Penix, right? This is a guy that you drafted with the intention of not playing him for a while. Wouldn't you want him to get as much action as possible while he is in the league, while you have the chance for him, while you can sit there and see him actually play games rather than just practice? It is a huge, huge difference, and it's something that I don't really understand why the Falcons are doing it. But as outside of all of that, let's see what these 4 rookie quarterbacks that did play did. We're going to start off with our number 4 quarterback, Drake May. Drake May is 4th on the list here. He was the 3rd overall pick in the draft, and he got really his first taste of action. We talked about it a little bit last week. He went 6 for 11, 47 yards. He did rush for a touchdown. So solid overall game. There's a lot to work on, though. He overthrew a lot of balls. He wasn't super accurate. He did have a nice, he did have a really nice job in the pocket on one of his deep throws that fell incomplete. But outside of that one play, he has a lot to work on before he probably will be named the starter. At number 3, I'm putting Bo Nix, and this is nothing that Bo Nix did. In his last couple games, he's had a completion percentage of 70% and 80%. That is almost perfect. He went 8 for 9 for 80 yards and a touchdown, a quarterback rating of 140. which if you're just looking at the box score in the stats of these rookie quarterbacks, Bo Nix had the best stats. But if you go and look at his performance, it's mostly checkdowns. Now, out of his 9 throws, only 2 of them went more than 10 yards in the air. If you go back and watch his tapes, he did add 12 yards rushing. It just wasn't super impressive to me. And I know that's all part of his game. It's part of the way that it's written out there in the with the Sean Payton system. But I wanted to see a little more out of him, take some risks maybe. And he's not in a position like these top 2 guys to take those risks. But it wasn't very impressive. It wasn't very impressive. It was very good. He has surprised me with how his game has translated to the NFL. This is kind of what we saw him do at Oregon last year. Be extremely accurate on these check down situations. And, I am impressed by what Bo Nix did. It's just when he has pressure up in his face, he has not shown the ability to get out of it. When pressure is up there, and again, this is not a great Broncos offensive line. He's going to deal with pressure, and the one time he dealt with pressure, it was not a decision. But I can forgive that. He's had a really good couple of games in the preseason, and I expect him to win the starting job. At number 2, I've got Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. The reigning Heisman winner has looked everything like a Heisman winner and more in the first 2 weeks of the preseason. In just 3 throws in week 1, he had a beautiful deep ball down the sideline that he checked into off of a screen pass. That's great reading of coverage, a beautiful hole shot there, as well as rushing for a touchdown. And that didn't really change in week 2. In week 2, he was probably he was the second most efficient quarterback by far. 10 for 12 for 78 yards, quarterback rating of 93.8. He looked really good. There were 1 or 2 things that, you can look at and say, hey, he can improve at this, he can improve at that. But he was putting the ball in places that only his receivers could get to. He was reading the defense. He had, precision on his throws. The accuracy was there. And, he was reading the defense with anticipation. And that's the biggest thing that I'm looking for in the preseason. I want to see if they can understand the NFL. Again, you're not getting full speed offense, full speed defense. But it is exciting to see for Washington, a guy like Jaden Daniels that can do it all. And I think they should be very excited for this season. And at number 1, I really thought about putting him at number 2, but I put Caleb Williams at number 1. And the reason I put him at number 1 is, yes, he did struggle in the beginning of his second game. He finished with a stat line of 6 for 13, 75 yards, only a quarterback rating of 64.6, which out of these 4 guys actually was the lowest. Now, you ask me why I put him at number 1. It's because of what he did after he struggled in the first quarter. The first quarter was bad. If you went and watched that game, he was behind receivers. He was misplacing the balls off of bootleg actions. And, that's going to happen. But what I really liked was the way that he bounced back. In the second quarter, dealing with lots of pressure, first of all, it didn't faze him. And that is something that is incredibly impressive to see. Being able to deal with the pressure. And I know he dealt with that a lot in USC with the state of their offensive line being the way that it was. But it was incredibly impressive against a solid defense that the Bengals had. Again, it is the preseason, but being able to get out of pressure, move his feet, still keep his eyes downfield, find people. Obviously, the big highlight of the day was his escape to the left, deep throw down the sideline to Rome Odunze. But he found Gerald Everett a lot in those situations. Gerald Everett might be a problem in the NFL this season. I think he's a sleeper to watch. He got targeted a lot in that Bears offense when the ones were out there with Caleb Williams. But Caleb Williams has the number 1 spot because of his ability to bounce back. Now, do I think Jaden Daniels could do that if he had to bounce back? From what I've seen, yes, I do. He hasn't had to bounce back, so maybe he should be number 1. But what Caleb Williams was able to do, his ability to stay calm even when things weren't going his way in a situation where, he has the whole world watching him. The preseason is his show right now, and he is showing out and doing a wonderful job. But let me know what you think of my list here of rookie quarterbacks. Would you make any changes, move guys up or down? Let me know what you think. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we are going to talk about some quarterback, so a little more quarterback news. We had one of these 4 rookie quarterbacks be named the starter for week 1. We'll talk about that, as well as another quarterback around the NFL also being named the starter in a quarterback battle. So we will talk about what that means for both of those respective teams, as well as their future this NFL season. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I want to be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is fake. I'm acting. Everything on the fake shit. Hoping one day I blow up in the face. The top is so vacant. I do shit that I think are amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out over 1,000 faces. Hey, teach my way into people. The music fit the music shit and do the music choose to live, but choose to take me, choose to find the music, creep and music get gone. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Please Lord, give me a sign. A sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the rookie quarterback performances from week 2 of the NFL preseason. We did a 1 through 4 ranking of them, as well as talking about the 2 quarterbacks that did not play and why they did not play it. In this segment here, we are going to finish up our continued coverage of quarterback news, as we had 2 announcements over the weekend and earlier today of week 1 starters for the NFL season. That's right, it's right around the corner, guys. Less than 20 days until the NFL season officially kicks off. But we had 2 new starters being announced. We're going to talk about those 2, who they are, what it means for their team, and much more. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net, or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. It should be right next to the chat option. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to continue our NFL coverage here in this segment, talk a little bit about 2 quarterbacks that were just named the week 1 starter for their teams, keeping on the rookie track, as I hinted to a little bit earlier on in the show. Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders was named the week 1 starter, kind of a foregone conclusion, but it is an official statement now from head coach Dan Quinn. This marks the 8th straight year that there will be a different week 1 starting quarterback in Washington. In 2017, Kirk Cousins. 2018, it was Alex Smith. 2019, Case Keenum. 2020, Dwayne Haskins. 2021, Ryan Fitzpatrick. 2022 was Carson Wentz. Last year, of course, was Sam Howell. And this year, it is now officially going to be Jaden Daniels. That is almost an unprecedented number of new starters in week 1. We talk about the Broncos and the Bears' inability to find quarterbacks. This is right along those lines of being unable to find an answer at QB. Now, the Commanders are in an interesting situation. They obviously have a lot of moving pieces within the organization over this offseason. Obviously, new head coach, new GM. They just got a new owner very recently, ending the reign of Dan Snyder. They got, obviously, new quarterback in the draft. There is a lot of new in that Washington Commanders organization. You can say a new name is also in the last 5 years. There's been a lot of change, and I think they're finally turning a corner over there in Washington, showing a little bit of, hey, we have an idea, a path forward for the first time in, honestly, as long as I can remember. This is a long time coming for Washington, which has been a proud football city in the past, but hasn't been for a while. So Jane Daniels is officially the starter over there, and I think that is huge. What he's done in this preseason has been incredibly impressive, coming off of a Heisman-winning season at LSU, going second overall in the draft. Washington could be sneaky good this year. I know we gave them a record prediction pretty early on in our series. We gave them a 7-10 record. They could maybe, possibly, sneak into that 7th spot in the wild card if a couple things go their way in the NFC. The other quarterback that was announced to be the Week 1 starter out of Las Vegas. We have Gardner Minshew winning a quarterback battle, maybe for the first time in his career. He has always been this backup to your guy, the guy that you want as your backup solution. In Jacksonville, where he started out, he was the backup solution. He comes up, with the Eagles, obviously with the Colts last season, he was the backup, and now he comes in, signs a pretty big, a substantially sized contract for a guy that's been a career backup with the Raiders, and has a quarterback competition with second-year guy Aiden O'Connell. Now, for my money, I think this is the right decision. I don't think this ever really was too close of a competition, but if you go and you look at the numbers from last season, it was pretty similar. You look at their touchdown to interception ratios. Now, you have to remember, Gardner Minshew played 6 more games than Aiden O'Connell here. It was 15-9 for Gardner Minshew. It was 12-7 for Aiden O'Connell. So they're very similar numbers, maybe a little more prolific on the touchdown side from Aiden O'Connell here. But when we're looking at these two guys that I think could be the difference between a successful season in Vegas and a disaster season for kind of experimental head coach Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce is not the guy that usually a team would hire to be their head coach. Now, everyone in the Raiders locker room loves him, and New York Giants legend here. So you gotta show some love for Antonio Pierce, but he's not the traditional kind of head coach that we're looking for nowadays. He's not offensive focused. He doesn't really call plays or run the defense, but he's that locker room guy that I think really could make a huge difference in Vegas. So they announced their starting quarterback. Gardner Minshew is the guy over there, and I think that is the difference between I think adding him makes them have the potential to have a winning season, right? You already have a lot of skill in Vegas, honestly. You have a potential defensive player of the year on the line in Max Crosby. You have, Devontae Adams, one of the best receivers in the NFL, who trade rumors have been swirling around him, and, consensus seems to be if they are struggling at or near the trade deadline, he will get moved, but they're not planning on moving him anytime soon. There's a lot, again, we talk about moving pieces, and obviously whenever there's a quarterback battle, there always are moving pieces, but both of these guys have shown the ability to be effective. There's a more proven track record with Gardner Minshew. Aiden O'Connell was up and down. He had a few, I should say, maybe just one, really, really solid games last season. Obviously the big one against the Chargers, but Gardner Minshew has proven to be this constant wherever he goes. And now he gets his second shot ever to be the starter. Obviously, he started off his career getting a shot in Jacksonville before immediately getting replaced by Trevor Lawrence, who now makes $55 million over there. But I think this is definitely the right decision. Whenever we do our predictions, we talk about the Raiders. It's difficult for me to choose because I think this team under Aiden O'Connell just has a different personality than it would under Gardner Minshew. And I think Gardner Minshew's personality is exactly what this Raiders teams need. That kind of fiery underdog mentality that it doesn't feel like Aiden O'Connell has. But anyway, those are the updates for quarterbacks. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to move into the world of college football. Talk about one of the Power 4 conferences, the Big Ten, we're going to preview today as college football is back on August 24th. That's right, just 5 days from now. We get our first college football action, starting off a chain reaction where we'll have football every single weekend up until the Super Bowl. I cannot wait for that. We will talk about the Big Ten coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've done a lot of quarterback coverage so far. We talked about the rookie quarterback report, going over how each of the 4 rookie quarterbacks that did play in week 2 of the preseason performed, as well as giving them a 1 to 4 ranking. And then we talked about 2 quarterbacks that were just named the week 1 starter for their respective teams in Jaden Daniels and Gardner Minshew. So we talked about what that would look like for both the Raiders and the Commanders. In this segment here, we're heading down to college football. We're going to talk all about the Big Ten today. We're going to do a little preview every single day leading up to kickoff on the college football season. That is on August 24th, just right around the corner. We're going to talk about the Big Ten today, talk about who I have winning it, a couple of surprises as well, and what to be expected from the new members to this conference. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you are on YouTube, you can also use that super chat option. It should do the same thing. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying in this segment here, we are going to continue our football coverage, talking a little bit about the Big Ten. Like I keep saying, the college football season is right around the corner, and I, for one, cannot wait for football to officially be back. There will be no more weekends without football, and what a better way to start than with the conference that has the reigning champions in it from last college football season, that being the Big Ten. Obviously, this is going to be a different looking Big Ten than before. We have, with all the different conference changes, the Pac-12 disappearing, a entirely new landscape for college football and the Big Ten. We have Washington, UCLA, USC, as well as Oregon, all moving from the Pac-12 on the West Coast, joining up with the Big Ten. Now, there's a couple of big powerhouse names here, and we'll start off with the 6 teams that are currently ranked in the preseason AP Top 25 poll, starting with number 2, Ohio State Buckeyes, the Oregon Ducks at 3, Penn State sitting at 8, 9, we have the Michigan Wolverines. That is 4 teams in the top 10 for this power of power conferences, before finishing out the top 25 at 23 with USC and 25 with Iowa. Now, the one thing about these teams, outside of Ohio State and Oregon, which are the preseason favorites to win this conference, they are far and away better than everybody else in this conference, in my opinion. The other teams that are ranked at number 8, the Penn State Nittany Lions, that is a team that constantly underperforms. Now, I think with the new 12-team playoffs, they have a real shot of maybe sneaking in with one of the lower seeds, depending on where the group of 5 school that gets in ends up and what the rest of the landscape of college football looks like. But Michigan is a team that I am a little more confused by, right? They lost a lot of production from last season, losing quarterbacks, running backs, lots of standouts on defense. They lost their head coach to the NFL as well, and now they're starting to get hit with sanctions. This is a team that I think, coming off of a national championship, is going to get hit like a truck. They are going to have a lot of trouble getting off of their feet, I believe, and it's unfortunate. You know, Michigan is a historic, storied program, and they do deserve to be ranked in the top 25. 9 just might be a little high. Iowa, I'm going to hold off on giving judgment to. They are, very famously not very good at scoring points, but their defense always is elite. I don't mind them being here at 25. And USC, again, they have Lincoln Riley. I don't know what the offense is going to look like without Caleb Williams, but Lincoln Riley has, if anyone can do it, a proven track record of developing Heisman winners, right? If you go back to his days at Oklahoma, basically all he's done, every quarterback that he's worked with just about has won a Heisman. It's honestly insane, the run that he has been on. But outside of these top schools, there are a couple teams that I think we should keep an eye out in the Big Ten. And we'll get to the contenders in a second. But some of these guys that I think might surprise a lot of people, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights are a team that have shown improvements. They have a great running back in Kyle Monangai, in my opinion, one of the best running backs in the country, and they have a solid defense as well. This is a team that is built to wear you down and outpace. It's just built to wear you down. Offensively, defensively, that's what they're going to do. And if there is a season that they can do it, I think this is it. Their schedule isn't ridiculously tough. This is something that I think that they really do have a shot at making some noise in college football this year. I'd be shocked if they didn't get a bowl game. I think they could compete for a solid bowl game. I'm not saying they're a playoff team by any stretch of the imaginations, but I don't think it would be shocking if they were flirting with, somewhere in the top 40 by the end of the year. The other team that I want to keep an eye on, and this might be a little more selfish for me, but it's the Indiana Hoosiers. They bring in head coach Curt Cignetti as a recent JMU grad. I followed him for a bit, but the TLDR on Curt Cignetti is he wins. Very simply put, he wins. Wherever he goes, he wins. He comes in and he wins. And Indiana does not have an incredibly great football history. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and say, hey, Indiana is a powerhouse football school, right? But Curt Cignetti coming in, bringing in a lot of talent from JMU, from schools across the country. I think Indiana, who, when you look at the prediction polls from all these coaches, the coaches polls for the Big Ten, is coming in near the bottom. While I don't think they're going to, challenge for a division win or anything, I do think that they have a real shot at qualifying for a bowl game this season. And I think that would be a huge success for them. Hey, Jason, how you doing? Last thing I wanted to talk about here in the Big Ten, obviously, the most important thing, who is going to win the Big Ten? And I think when you're talking about it, this all comes down to those top two teams. The number 2 team in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes, and the number 3 team in the country, the Oregon Ducks. Now, these are the two teams that are definitely the best. You look at by return value, the Ohio State has got almost everyone back. They have an improvement at quarterback, just naming Will Howard the starter officially, although, again, that's another thing that I don't think was really ever in question after they grab him in the transfer portal. This is an Ohio State team that is built to win a national championship this year, and honestly, I think they are my pick to win a national championship, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to win the Big Ten. And this is an Ohio State team that I think will make the playoffs regardless of winning the Big Ten or not. Now, I do think they are going to win the Big Ten. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I think Ohio State is going to win the Big Ten, but don't sleep on Oregon. We talk about all these changes with the NIL class coming in this year. Oregon is the king of that. Nike has said, "Hey, take all the money. Go ahead and build this program," and they have done that. Their class of transfers are insane. What they have been able to do out there in Oregon, and I think if there is a team that is going to challenge Ohio State, Georgia, even Ohio State and Georgia, pretty much are the top 2 teams in college football this season. If there is a team out there that's going to do it, it's going to be Oregon. And some people might say Texas, and we'll talk a little bit about Texas when we get to the SEC later on this week. But the expansions of these schedules, and I what these new teams are going to what these new teams within the Big Ten are going to do. Obviously, travel is going to play a big role. Some of the biggest games of the year are going to be in the Big Ten. Obviously, we were just talking about that Oregon-Ohio State matchup. That takes place on October 12th. That is going to be one of the biggest games of the season. That's probably my favorite game that I'm looking forward to this season. But the Big Ten is chock full of talent. And if I had to go and look and just say right now, how many teams are going to make the college football playoff? You 2. In fact, no, I can guarantee you 2. I can guarantee you Ohio State and Oregon are going to make it. There is a shot out there that 4 of them make it, but I think the number I'm going to settle on is 3. I think both Ohio State and Oregon are going to make it. One of them will be the champion, and then I think whoever makes it to the Big Ten championship game, assume it's Iowa right now, playing against either Ohio State or Oregon. Excuse me. As long as they're not, clearly inferior, I think the Big Ten will get 3 teams in, maybe even 4. This is a conference that clearly is at the top of the conference hierarchy. I've talked a lot about this. There is a clear divide between the in conferences and the out conferences, and the Big Ten is absolutely in the in conference group. It's them and the SEC, and everybody else is about 300 million miles behind. So I'm excited. I really am excited to see what happens this season. This is the wildest offseason, I think, ever in college football, with all of the changes, the conference realignments, the NIL ruling. It just has completely shaken up the game, and I'm so excited to see what this new era of college football begins with. But anyway, let me know what you think of the Big Ten. I have Ohio State winning it, and I have 3 teams making it to the new 12-team college football playoff system out of the Big Ten. But anyway, we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to finish off our show in these last 2 segments talking about the Denver Broncos. We've talked about Bo Nix a little bit so far earlier on in the show, but we're going to continue our series talking about every single NFL team, starting with giving them an off-season grade and then giving them a 2024 NFL season record prediction. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you're just tuning in, we've just finished going over the rundown of the Big Ten as we prepare for the new era of college football to begin this season. We also talked about a bunch of NFL quarterback news, talking about the rookie quarterback performances in week 2 of the preseason, as well as talking about 2 quarterbacks that were named the week 1 starter for their respective teams. In this segment, we are continuing our series talking about every single NFL team, previewing them for the NFL Week 1, as we are almost done. Can you believe it? The NFL season is right around the corner. We have 6 more teams left, including this one, the Denver Broncos. We, as always, are going to start off talking about their offseason, their draft, any front office decisions that were made, see if we can give them a grade based on what they did, before taking a break and coming back with a record prediction for them. But today we are talking about the Denver Broncos. And before we get into that, though, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat button. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to talk about the Denver Broncos here today. Their offseason has been one that has been really heavily criticized, and for good reason. Now, we've seen with what Bo Nix has been able to do in these first 2 weeks of the preseason, at least for me, some of that criticism wear down a little bit. But that's not to say it was a good offseason by any stretch of the imagination at all. And with the Broncos this offseason, I think we have to start with Russell Wilson, right? And this story goes back just a couple years ago. They make the trade for, at the time, one of the top quarterbacks in the league, Russell Wilson, and it's all downhill from there. They give up 5 first and second round picks, as well as Drew Lock, a couple of players, including Noah Fant as well, to go and get Russell Wilson. Then they immediately sign him to a massive extension. That was just 2 years ago. They also brought in a head coach. That went poorly. They bring in Sean Payton as well last season, trading a first and a second for the coach from the Saints, getting a third in return for that. And Sean Payton gives up on Russell Wilson after just over half a season. Now, was that the right move? Probably. But it comes with consequences in the short term, especially a team that already is struggling immensely in the short term. There's almost no positives in the short term for them. They have to eat $85 million of dead cap space. That is a ridiculously large number. $50 million of dead cap this season, $30 million of dead cap next season. That is not a number that normally happens. When we talked about quarterback contracts earlier this offseason, do you feel comfortable paying a quarterback 20% of your cap? Well, the Broncos are doing that this season. They're paying Russell Wilson 20% of their cap to play for the Steelers. That is a ridiculous statement to say, and it's not something we're ever going to. I'm not going to say ever. It's not something we will most likely ever see again in the history of the National Football League. So this is the situation we're at with the Broncos. Already a gloom situation. Let's see what they do to fix it. Sean Payton is here for a second year. He's one of the best coaches in the history of the NFL. He has a plan. So let's start with the draft. Here's what they do. With their 12th overall pick, their first round pick, they draft Bo Nix. And what an interesting decision there. I am not a Bo Nix fan. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am a Bo Nix fan. What he has done in the preseason has impressed me. It hasn't impressed me enough to make me believe in him for this season. He has been incredibly efficient on incredibly safe throws. He threw, when we talked about this in our first segment here, he only threw 2 passes over 10 yards all of last game. He threw 9 passes, only 2 of them were past that 10-yard mark. And that's not something that I expect someone to throw every single ball past 10 yards down the field. But I expect someone, especially in preseason, to take chances. Now, he most likely has won the starting spot this preseason. He started off as the 3rd string, behind guys like Jared Stidham and Zach Wilson. That is not a good look originally. I don't really believe in Bo Nix, and call me a hater, but he needs to prove it to me. He can't just have one incredibly efficient year in college after, what he did at Auburn and make me change my mind about him. Oregon was a much better situation. He had a lot more talent around him. The offensive line was great. He's not stepping into that situation in Denver. It's probably going to be a mess. But talking about the rest of the draft there, like I said, they don't have too many picks because of the Russell Wilson and Sean Payton trades. But in the 4th round, they went in and got speedy wide receiver Troy Franklin out of Oregon, teammate of Bo Nix. He's currently sitting as about wide receiver 6 on the depth chart, and I really like that pick. I think he's a guy that could make an impact if he gets on the field. Now, Denver isn't particularly deep at any position, really, period. But wide receiver is by far the position that they're deepest at. You want to talk about a team that has some promising guys there. Courtland Sutton, someone that has unfortunately been plagued with bad quarterback play his entire career, is an incredible jump ball artist, maybe one of the best in the leagues. You have Tim Patrick, who has been very unlucky with injuries. The last 2 seasons, he has missed because of injury. He is a very talented receiver. I'm curious to see how he does when he finally gets back to full speed. They traded away Jerry Jeudy to the Browns. That's fine, whatever. You have Marvin Mims, speedster, made it to the Pro Bowl last year as a returner. We talked about Troy Franklin. They bring in Josh Reynolds, who has his moments. He obviously didn't have the greatest game in the last time we saw him out in the playoffs with the Lions, but he has his moments, and he is currently slotted as that wide receiver 3 for them. But outside of that wide receiver room, they've got just about nothing. They have Pat Surtain, one of the best corners in the league. That's it on defense. And it's a shame because this is a team that before last season was one of the best. Well, that's what they were known for, defense. The offense might not be there, but you can rely on the defense. They were the 30th best team in the league against the pass. They were the 20th best team in the league, 19th best team in the league against the run. This is not a team that made major improvements to the defense. This is a defense that is going to continue to struggle. I don't expect Pat Surtain to be on the team after the trade deadline. Honestly, I'm shocked he made it past the trade deadline this year. They cut star safety and fan favorite Justin Simmons, who now earlier last week signed a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons, and he's a great player. A lot of their moves don't make sense to me, and there's not really another way to put it. I don't agree with what they're doing, and I know they're in a tough spot. I know it's kind of unfair for me to judge them on the same playing field as a team that didn't throw 20% of their cap space to the Wolves, right? But you have to. This is a decision that they made. It's something they have to deal with, and they had to hit that reset button somehow. I'm giving the Denver Broncos an F for their offseason. I don't think there was a single move that I can sit here and highlight and say, hey, you know what? I like what you did there, Denver Broncos. I think that is going to be a big piece of your future. And maybe I could be way off on Bo Nix, but nothing he's done has really stuck out to me and impressed me. I'm giving them an F. They're the worst offseason, I think, in football. And again, a lot of this does ride on Bo Nix, so maybe I'm being unfair. But he needs to prove something to me. And his highly efficient performances in the preseason aren't doing it. So yeah, an F for them. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to go through all 18 weeks, all 17 games of the Denver Broncos season, give them a record prediction, see if they can get past that 5.5 win mark that Vegas has set for them, see if we hit that over or under, as well as anything else that's going on around the world of the Denver Broncos. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the Denver Broncos offseason. I gave them an F. Not really a fan of any move that they made this offseason, although they are in quite the pickle with the whole Russell Wilson situation. Before we get into the schedule prediction for the Denver Broncos, we are remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the pet show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. Either of those things should have a message pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to finish off our show today going over the Denver Broncos schedule. The Denver Broncos, as I alluded to in the last segment here, I am not a fan of. I think they have the worst quarterback situation in the league, maybe just ahead of the Vikings, actually, after everything that's been going on over there. But I do think they have the worst quarterback situation in the league currently. The backup options to a guy I don't believe in Bo Nix, are Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham. Not a great situation to be in. But we'll see if they can beat the Vegas line set for them. That is at 5.5 wins. The Denver Broncos start off their season on the road in Seattle, reminiscent of just 2 years ago when they went in there with first-year Bronco quarterback Russell Wilson and lost. And I think we're going to have the same result this year. The Broncos head into Seattle and lose in Week 1. Week 2, home opener, Monday Night Football, taking on Russell Wilson, maybe, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback in this. The Steelers also have an interesting quarterback situation to decide between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I think Russell Wilson will be the starter, but based on this preseason, I think they're pretty much neck and neck, and I don't know who will start. So for now, We're going to say it's a Russell Wilson revenge game. I do think the Broncos win this game, though, because revenge just isn't in the heart of Russell Wilson. It never has been, right? It just not something he believes in. Broncos improve to 1-1 on the year. Then they take a road trip down to Florida, take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That one's not going to end well for them either. The Bucs win this game, and the Broncos fall to 1-2 on the year. Then they get Aaron Rodgers and former head coach taking on the Jets in MetLife Stadium. The Broncos lose that game as well. They fall to 1-3 on the year. Then they get a couple of home games against a couple of home games against a couple of division opponents. Starting off at home against those Vegas Raiders and just named starting quarterback Gardner Minshew. I do think the Raiders are going to lose this game, although I think this is going to be a very tight one. The Broncos improve to 2-3 on the year. Then they get the Chargers. Justin Herbert should be back. He practiced for the first time since that ankle injury. This is at home as well. I'm giving this win to the Broncos. They get back up to 500 after 6 weeks at 3-3. Then we get a fun one. Sean Payton going back down to New Orleans to take on his former team, the New Orleans Saints. The Broncos are going to win this. This is the game that Sean Payton is going to coach his heart out on. I think Sean Payton is the X factor for this game, and I think the Broncos win it in primetime. They improve to 4-3. Who would have thunk it? Broncos over 500, 4-3 on the year. Solid place to be in. Then they host the Panthers, and again, this is a game I think could go either way, but they're coming off a 3-game win streak, a big high. I think the Panthers knock them down a peg. They lose to the Panthers here and fall to 4-4. Doesn't get any easier from there. Halfway through the season, basically they are 4-4. They get a bunch of really solid teams down the stretch. They have to take on the Ravens. They have to take on the Chiefs. They have to take on the Falcons. They still have to take on the division a couple more times. They have to take on the Bengals and the Browns as well. It's not easy at all. There's no good way to get this done. But they get the Chiefs twice. I forgot, division opponent here. But after the Panthers loss, they go on the road to Baltimore, take on the Ravens. Not a very good bounce back situation. They fall to 4-5 on the year through 9 weeks. Then they get their first game against the Chiefs. This one on the road in Arrowhead. Not a shot in the world the Broncos are winning this one. Chiefs have had a stranglehold against the Broncos. I believe the Broncos have only won one game in the last 6 or 7 years against the Chiefs, and that happened last season. But the Chiefs win this game in Arrowhead. And the Broncos fall to 4-6. Then they get the Falcons. Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. The Justin Simmons return to Denver. This is going to be a good moment for Broncos fans, but I think the Falcons will win this one. They fall to 4-7. Then they get the Raiders again, a team they beat before. I think it goes differently this time. It is in Vegas, and I don't think the Broncos are going to get lucky twice in a row. They fall now through 12 weeks to 4-8. Not a good spot to be in. After a 3-game win streak, they lose 5 in a row. And then they get the Browns at home before their bye. And I do think they win this game. The Browns are a team that I think are going to be really up and down, and I think the Broncos will be able to take advantage of that and win that game, improve to 5-8 on the year. Then they get a bye, a late bye for this team, a much-needed bye as they get ready for the final stretch of the season. It's not the most difficult, but you are going to take on 2 of the top teams in the AFC, in the Bengals and the Chiefs down the stretch here. They get the Colts off of a bye. Anthony Richardson comes in to Denver in the Battle of the Horse, and I think the Colts are going to win this one. Denver falls to 5-9 on the year. Then on the road, at the Chargers, division opponent. They split that season series with the Chargers, lose this one on the road, fall to 5-10. Last 2 games of the season, real tough. At this point, they've been eliminated from playoff contention. They get the Bengals and the Chiefs. The Bengals on the road. Joe Burrow, I think, is going to slice and dice up this defense that has been one of the worst against the pass in the entirety of football. The Bengals are going to win this game. Broncos fall to 5-11. Then they get the Chiefs and their season, and that is not a good draw. The Chiefs are here to lock up that number 1 overall seed in the AFC. They need to play their starters for this game. They win this game, and the Broncos fall to 5-12 on the year as a whole. Not a very good season. I don't know what people are expecting. Now, I will say, I made this list with in mind that I don't believe in Bo Nix. Bo Nix is not a guy that I'm going to sit here and defend. This is a Broncos team that at its lowest could win 3 games. At its peak, I give them 6, maybe 7. Now, I give them 5 here. I do think there's a couple of games that could go either way, specifically the Panthers, the Steelers, the Browns. One of those Chiefs games, I bet you, will be close, as well as the Colts games. Those are 5 games that I think could go either way. About half of those games, I have them winning. If you flip-flop all those games that I had, the ones that I think could be close, they go 6-11. So it's not that big of a difference from what I have right now. But keep in mind that this is a team that is coached by Sean Payton, one of the best coaches in the history of the NFL. There is a lot of wiggle room here for this team to be better than I expect, than a lot of people expect. I am saying they stay under that 5.5 line, finish 5-12 on the year. But let me know what you think of this Broncos team. What do you think Bo Nix is going to do in his rookie season? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. As always, I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow, going over the Raiders, going over the the Big 12 for college football, as well as any other major breaking news from around the world of sports. Tune back in, same time, same place tomorrow. I will see you then. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Them tired of shit and the cop game fit, yeah, damn.